If you can't describe your setups in 30 seconds, you're probably not doing it right. You probably need to figure out how to make it more simple. Get confident, and you got a year under your belt that you're profitable, then just add a little bit more size.
Hello, and welcome to The Trader's Journey by Investors Underground. In this episode, I'll speak with a part-time trader and electrical engineer who's been making consistent strides in his trading journey. Investors Underground members might recognize him from the chat as Fortini, and if you've attended Traders for a Cause in the past few years, you may have already met him. It's my pleasure to introduce Matt Fortini. Hello, Matt. Thanks for being here and taking the time to speak with me today.
Hey, Anthony, how you doing?
Doing well, thanks. It's great to actually have you on the show. So, we've met, I think, a couple of times at Traders for a Cause, so it's really cool that we get to do this.
Yeah, I'm excited for sure. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And so, Matt, for people who haven't already met you, can you tell them a little bit about yourself and how you went from electrical engineering to discovering the stock market and the world of trading?
Sure. Yeah. So I was an electrical engineer by degree. Went to University of New Hampshire. I worked for a couple years at Lockheed Sanders and actually hated it. I liked kind of the design part of it, but I hated being in the lab. So actually, funny, I became an EMT part time for some excitement because I thought that I was going to end up liking engineering if I had some excitement. And I loved being an EMT. Went to paramedic school and actually worked as a paramedic for about 10 years down in Rhode Island for the town of Cumberland, Rhode Island. So kind of right around. So we had a couple kids, and as a paramedic, you're not making a lot of money and stuff. So we had kids, and I had a buddy who actually owns a manufacturer's rep company. He actually was a college roommate of mine, and so he had been trying to hire me for many years. And so finally, two kids, I was like, let's do this. So I ended up leaving and actually joined this on the sales side. So basically, I'm a sales rep right now. So about 2007 or so is when I left, which was kind of like probably my first intro to the trading side. My father-in-law actually was a day trader. He actually traded in a room with a bunch of guys, and prior to the GFC, he was making tons of money and all that sort of stuff. And I didn't really know much about it because I was a paramedic at the time, but he ended up losing a lot of money like everyone did. So that was kind of my first exposure. So in 2007, I kind of moved to New Hampshire with my new job, and that's kind of when I met Nate and Ty and Zach from Avidity Fitness, and so we've been friends for about 17 years now or so, and they were probably my next exposure to day trading. It was always funny when we worked out at the gym together. If they showed up at 2:30 in the afternoon, it was a bad day and they lost money. If they didn't show up to work out at 2:30, it was a good day and they were still in front of the screen. So it was early on in kind of Nate's world too. So we've known each other for a long time. So with my job, every year I get kind of a bonus and commissions and stuff. And so I've been basically kind of putting all this cash away. And right around kind of 2019 during COVID, I had all this cash and I called Ty, right? And I said, what do I do? I said, I know you know the markets, and how do I invest this money, and what should I do? And so he gave me a bunch of ETFs to put the money in. So the more I kind of started looking at the markets and watching the Qs go up and my money growing, I called him. I'm like, can I trade these things? And he was like, yeah, but you might not ever get back into the same price. So I kind of started trading ETFs, and next thing you know it, in December, basically, I called him and said, I want to join IU. And he's like, you're crazy. I can't believe you're going to day trade and that sort of stuff. So that was kind of really it. I ended up joining IU in 2019, and I, didn't have really a clue what I was doing. I think a lot of people in COVID started trading and just, closing their eyes and buying stuff and whatever. But that was kind of my first exposure to it for sure.
That's incredible. It seems in a couple of different ways the market kind of found you between father-in-law and meeting Nate and Ty. Do you remember some of the first trades that you entered during that time? What was that like?
Yeah, I remember, like PayPal, Cloudflare, and basically, everything just went up, and for that, whole year going into 2020, and so I was like, this is so easy, that just like the market always goes up and I'm making all this money and stuff. And, I think I traded Apple and, some of those other, big caps, that, for sure. So yeah, it was interesting time in the market, that's for sure. At least an interesting intro to the market.
Yeah, and you were there, trading with some of the great traders in Investors Underground. What was that experience like being in the room, especially during that exciting time?
Yeah, it was crazy because, I think my first exposure, I was trying to just pay attention to what everyone was doing. I don't even think at the time, I really knew the difference between a small cap, a large cap, or whatever. It was kind of like you buy low and you sell high and whatever. And so, I think, just kind of chasing small caps all day, seeing, Nate calling stuff out in the room. And it wasn't until like, this really doesn't make sense. I don't even know what I'm trading. I'm not familiar with the tickers. I'm not familiar with the companies. And, I think that, that kind of evolves over the time, but that was kind of like my first exposure to IU, was just kind of watching these guys chasing these small caps all over the place. And, you get into news, with the news being called out and you get into a trade and, you just realize, very quickly that trading news for me is no good.
If you're looking for ways to take your trading to the next level, Investors Underground might have something to offer. You'll have access to courses and mentors to learn from, some of the best technology available for scanning stocks and breaking news, and access to the chat rooms where you'll find a vibrant community of focused traders who share their trade ideas in real time each day. IU members also have access to the morning broadcasts where moderators share their trade ideas for the day ahead during the pre-market session. Members have access to the midday study sessions with Stan, the midweek study sessions with Sam, webinars, moderator watch lists, and all the other resources that Investors Underground has to offer. Listeners of the Trader's Journey can access exclusive membership deals available at investorsunderground.com/journey. And now, back to our episode with Matt Fortini. And were
For
you
sure.
trading equities exclusively? Did you dabble in options at all?
Yeah, I was mostly equities. I don't even think I really knew much about options. I was basically just, probably somewhere along the line, and I don't know when that was probably maybe 2020. My brother-in-law actually, we were away in Aruba on a family vacation, and I kept telling him, I'm like, I'm making all this money, everything's going up, and so he started actually day trading as well. And he had a full-time job as well too, but he ended up in an option room that he really liked, called Option One, and they have some proprietary indicators and stuff like that. So and so it was a good exposure. I ended up joining that room just to kind of learn kind of on the option side. They did like a lot of spreads, calendar spreads and straddles and bullish put spreads and that sort of thing. So I kind of learned a little bit on that side, and then obviously just straight, calls and puts and that sort of thing. So I'm still actually in that room mostly just to kind of, kind of watch some of that and learn some of that stuff as well too. And they have a cool kind of indicator on their chart that I do kind of watch, and some of their scans similar to the IU tools. They got some cool scans that can kind of scan pretty quickly, relative weakness and relative strength. That's mostly kind of that room that they kind of focus mostly on relative weak, relative strength type stuff. So, yeah. So that's kind of how I learned a little bit on the option side. But doing spreads and all that stuff is not my style.
How did your style evolve over time? Did you start trading small caps in 2019, 2020, and is that still what you trade today, or are there different types of setups that you're looking for in 2024?
Yeah, so I would say, probably going into, so I kind of quickly got away from small caps. I kind of realized probably in 2020, mid 2020 or so. It might have even actually been right after Traders for a Cause. Like, I need to really kind of create my own thing, and I think that's kind of been my main focus for the last 4 or 5 years is just to really kind of create my own style, scan my own stuff, trade my own stocks. So most of the time in the room, I'm calling stuff out that no one in the room is really doing. Although the trend is definitely more now. I see like tacos kind of trading more large caps and that sort of stuff. But I always kind of felt like I wanted to kind of do my own thing, learn from everyone else, in IU, and then use social media and the few people that are strong and that are good, because you obviously have to filter the noise, and just kind of take bits and pieces of that and kind of create your own thing and just stay in your lane. And I think that's certainly helped me to just be consistent over the last 2 years. So I've been kind of consistently profitable over 2 years going into Traders for Cause 24 this year. And it allows you to kind of branch out and kind of dabble on other setups as well too. So I'm mostly, I would say, large cap, mega cap, and some mid cap type stuff. I'm probably prior, during COVID, I was pretty much long, almost 100%. I didn't want to, that was the other difference in the room too. The IU room is almost everyone's short for the most part. So I didn't really want to do that because it was just way too much risk in my mind. So I was mostly long, and then 2022 came, and you kind of learn quickly that you have to adapt. And that's obviously talk to some of these high end traders. That's one of the big skills you really need to know and learn very quickly, that when the market turns, you need to adapt quickly. So in 2022, I spent a lot of time learning how to short. It was a little bit easier to short in 2022 because everything was below its moving averages, and then the trend was down, right? So it was a good environment to kind of learn that, because it was a little bit more forgiving, that if you swung a short, you probably was still going to be okay, but at least kind of gives you that skill. So and then coming out of that into 2023, I'm probably 50% short, 50% long. I try to day trade, being a part-time trader. I try to trade Wednesday, Friday, day trade Wednesday and Friday, and be in front of my screens. And, I definitely trade Fridays, day trade, sometimes Wednesday with my full-time job. It's a struggle to do that, but that's kind of what what I'd like to do is Wednesday, Friday, day trade. And then I do swing trade as well too, when I'm away from the screen. So, yeah, and mostly it's equity. I do kind of do calls and puts here and there, but that's obviously a whole nother kind of ball of wax too. Once you kind of learn theta and you understand premiums and what you're paying, which I think Chris in the room, that's one of those things. We in the room we talk a lot more about options than we used to. Back 2, 3, 4 years ago. With Nate and Chris, and Chris really understands it and has been teaching people about gamma squeezes and that sort of thing. So I think, learning that, gives you a little bit more confidence to kind of take a breath, look at premium, look at what the VIX is doing, look at IV and that sort of thing, and when to enter. And so, you kind of learn along the way, as we all do as traders, right? You're learning something new and more skills and stuff.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, the sort of the evolution of a trader and even a trading room. You have so many more options traders. Chris is phenomenal at what he does and teaching
Yeah,
everybody about, the world of options and how they can have an impact on stocks, the underlying equity of a
right.
move has just been incredible to see. And yeah, Nate sharing much more of his options trading these days. That's really incredible to see. And one question I had was about the type of setups that you're trading and you're interested in. Would you be willing to share a couple, or a setup, a trade you've had, sort of, so that we could get a sense for what you're looking for and what type of setups appeal to you these days?
Sure, sure. So like on the long side, I would say obviously, so typically I start with the daily. So I'll do my scans, and then kind of write down. The way I kind of do it is I have, longs on one column, shorts on the other, and then I kind of put a section below of like charts of interest. So I basically use stock charts and FinViz to kind of do my scans, and I kind of do that, and then I use TrendSpider to go and actually do the charting and kind of annotate and draw trend lines and that sort of thing. So on the long side, from a daily, it's kind of the typical like trend line break type thing, like, kind of a down wedge, a descending wedge with price consolidation getting tight, kind of closer to that trend line. Obviously, the tighter the better, because the risk rewards better, right? Because you're closer to the trend line break, but you're also the low where your stop is going to be is pretty tight in that wedge, right? Or bull flag, or that sort of pattern. So that's typically kind of like from And I would say it has to be above moving averages or at least the long-term moving averages, like, the 200, the 100, and the 50. I would say to go long. Sometimes obviously the 20 and the 9. I use the 9 EMA, and then SMAs simples with 200, 100, and 50. And 20, and then I use the 9 EMA kind of for more short-term type stuff. So, you can sometimes have that consolidation of those short terms that, maybe the price action is kind of below that or just kind of consolidating along those short term, moving averages. So that would be a decent setup for me. So I'll show you. So this is Dutch Brothers. So this is kind of the daily. So this is what I would, look for. So, I basically, you have your trend line here. Um, so, it's basically above 200, 150 day, and then you kind of, I have basically the 9 and the 3 here. And you can kind of see this is almost what I would call an active sequence, the 9 basically crossing, the 3 crossing the 9, right? So short-term momentum, you have volume compression kind of here on this pullback, like Miniviri says, with the VCP volume contraction. So you want to see volume contraction. Typically this, so I always have a MACD and RSI on here. So this MACD is kind of questionable here for this breakout, but usually like a good long, the MACD would be swooping down here and then, it would be just about to cross, which I think maybe in my hood chart has that as well too. So this would be, kind of, a decent setup that I would put on my watch. I have this horizontal kind of price alert here where, it breaks through the trend line that I would actually potentially get long on that with some volume move. Obviously this volume is light, but I would, I would basically put this on my morning charts on my Thinkorswim platform and just kind of put some price alerts out there and look for that to, to kind of break out. So that's that one. And then so here's another example. So this kind of shows. So here's, Robinhood. So here's another example, right? So it's above, 200, 100, 50 day. You got MACD just about to cross here. You get kind of RSI with increasing strength here as well, even though price action's kind of, compressing low volume. So basically, I would, this obviously is above, already broke the trend line. So what I would do is probably put a price alert here for a retest of that trend line. Basically like a red to green sort of thing, on an intraday chart, and look to kind of get long on that. So I would say one of the other probably long charts that I typically like that I probably think I'm more successful with is basically like a 9 EMA pullback on the daily. So basically, and then you have a bullish hammer off that. And so what I would do is basically that would be alerted. So on my scan, my stock charts, I have a scan that basically does 9 EMA pullbacks with volume. So those come up. So if you see a bullish hammer on that, I would definitely be alerted with that. And then the following day, what I basically would do is if it breaks the high of the previous day candle after that bullish flag off that 9 EMA, that would be a good entry point, for me. So I find that that's a pretty good setup for me too, especially stuff with strength, that's kind of already gone and you don't want to FOMO it, right? But you have a nice opportunity where you have a pretty decent technical pullback. It's a good entry point. That's, yeah, so that's kind of some examples of kind of my longs. Um, so I have another long setup that I do that I've really kind of been practicing is an inside day breakout on the long side. I mean, you can obviously with that inside day is kind of that indecisive kind of thing. But I typically try to just look for a long. I mean, you can obviously go short on it if it breaks down in the other direction, but so here's kind of an example. So this is ARM. So I have a couple. So I have kind of an example of kind of the daily, the day before I actually entered it on the intraday. But here's, a perfect example, is, you obviously had a bunch of bullish flag breakouts, it's had some strength, it's above all its moving averages. And then on this day here, it basically had an inside day. It's still increasing RSI, MACD is still going up. So that to me, like that comes up on my inside day scan, and that's a awesome long chart for me, right? So, my plan would be, on the following day is that, essentially like an opening range breakout, or basically, breakout over the previous day, high, essentially. So I'll show you kind of the intraday chart on that. Um, you can kind of, so this is, I think it was like August 4th, and this screen here that I'm going to show you is actually the 5th. So this is the next day. Um, so you can see pre-market highs here as it's making pre-market highs. And then kind of once it basically breaks out of that range, or that, the prior day and pre-market, I basically entered. And so, it basically kind of moved, and then kind of sold, into strength as long, as I went up. So that's a not, decent inside day breakout, that I basically played. So I do like kind of practicing that a little bit more, kind of in my playbook.
Awesome. And one question, Matt, for the arm trade, your entry I see is when it's breaking out. Were you thinking in terms of risk management for stopping out? Is it if it goes under the and breaks below the low of the day?
So I would basically, my original thought was my stop would be the break of the previous day's low.
Okay.
So, I mean, you could certainly put it at, either, pre-market low or the low of the day sort of thing. I kind of gave it a little bit more room in my head with the mental stop that, if it basically closed before, at the low, below the prior day low, that would be my stop. And I kind
Okay.
of use mental stops, and on a day trades, I'm pretty good at keeping that mental stop. On my swing trades, it's one of the things I guess, we can talk about too, just from, kind of evolving and whatever. But on a swing trade, that is something that, I am still kind of working on a process on is, that swing trade stop. If you get in at a decent point, say on a like a wedge breakout, right, and your risk reward is probably the best there, right, because it's tight. Your low, or your low of the day is pretty tight to your entry. So that's a pretty good kind of idea on where that stop would be. I think like on a swing where if you're kind of within a channel and you break out of a trend line, where is that stop line? Because you're not tight in that wedge anymore, right? So I know some people kind of use like 1%, and that sort of thing. So I've kind of teetered around with percentage of ADR, because obviously you have stuff that has ADRs that are $5, and you have others that are a dollar. And do you take a percentage of the ADR and just kind of put that as just a flat out risk? Or do you use technicals to do that? So kind of a mix of those, but I haven't really nailed down that exact yet. So that's definitely something that I'm kind of working on the swing side. But on a day trade, I'm pretty strict on my risk and my stops.
Just to recap, yeah, you're looking for, consolidations, looking for price patterns to sort of stabilize and for that channel to kind of slow down a little bit, and then looking for a potential breakout and utilizing that, that 3 day EMA and the 9 days. Is that about accurate?
Yep, exactly. Yeah, definitely on my longs. That's pretty much what I look for sure.
Okay. Thank you so much
Yeah,
for sharing that. That helps the audience and myself for sure get an
sure.
understanding for what your trading style is. I wanted to ask a little bit about, your swing trades because I know you have a job on top of the trading. So how do you sort of factor all of that in and make your swing trades work with your daily schedule and your routine for your actual job?
Yeah, so it's definitely it's a struggle working full time and trading part time. Because of a lot of aspects, right? I think one of the things you and I kind of talked about, and I've mentioned to Sam a few times on our midweek study sessions is, you can't, with me day trading, say Wednesday, Friday, it's hard to basically just show up at my desk Wednesday morning when I haven't done anything Monday, Tuesday, and have a pulse of the market and what's actually going on. You have to kind of have a taste of that, even if you're not trading, or even, which is kind of partly with the swings too, at least, like the whole reason why you do a starter, right? Nate's always like, I want to put a starter on because I, want to get a feel of what this is actually doing. So you almost have to have a feel. So, so basically, every night I'll do scans and kind of put my paperwork together. And even if I'm going to be on the road working, I'll actually put all of my high level setups on my thinkorswim screens, and then basically just set price alerts and then leave for the day. And then just because I'll see price alerts, I'll see that, hey, Palantir broke out and, this is, looks good and that sort of thing. So at least you're kind of paying attention and you're almost forced to pay attention to that. On my swings, that certainly helps too, so kind of having a swing in position. Even when I'm working, I'll be looking at my phone, like, looking at my charts on my phone and that sort of thing. It makes a little bit more difficult kind of from, having a mental stop on your swings, kind of like we talked about, because I don't really like to put hard stops on there. Because again, the fact of working a full-time job and having income coming in, and not having to trade to make income and revenue for my family and myself gives me a little bit more on the psychology side that I'm a little bit more chill with, hey, if I get a little bit more room on my swings, probably than some other people who, have to make money every day, sort of thing, right? So I think from a psychology standpoint of part-time trading and swing trading, that helps, because I'm like, hey, I think part of it too is as long as my thesis of that company kind of is still there, I give it a little bit more room, right? So, obviously an example, right? AMD goes down, I have a swing, I kind of basically turn it into like, let's build this position here, right? AMD is going to be strong. I don't need the money now. I don't need to take the loss now because I have a job, that sort of thing. So it allows me to kind of get bigger positions and make more money on some of those swings. So that certainly is one of the nice advantages of having a full-time job, and that psychology of I don't have to do this every day, sort of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know there's such an appeal to rush to trade full time. But one of the things that happens if you're constantly in front of those monitors on a 1 minute chart is this tendency to get moved out of a position, maybe because you are using a hard stop, or because you're thinking, I'm only doing this, as a day trade. It might make more sense for me to flip my position, or, there's so many things that can happen. In other words, if you're
Yeah.
constantly just looking at the chart, you're there every single day looking at every single move. Whereas, if you're swing trading or you have income coming in besides the trading profits, you have more ability to just let the emotions pass and not succumb to sort of that panic that inevitably happens when you're
Right.
trading or trading with too big size. As anyone who's traded full time or tried to intraday trade is very aware of how that happens.
Sure. Yeah, exactly. I think it definitely, I mean, I think you said it perfectly. It just kind of takes the emotion out of, kind of being, in that spot. So it's definitely helpful for sure.
And one question I had as well, Matt, is are you always at your home desk every night looking at charts, or is there any sort of travel that you do? Because I know some people might be traveling for their full time career. Is that something that you have to worry about at all? How does that work for you?
Yeah, so being a rep, we're a sales rep in New England. So for the most part, I'm home every night. There are some times where I travel and get on a plane and that sort of thing, and I, certainly, look at charts on my phone and that sort of stuff. But for the most part, I'm home every night, and I would say, I get home, do my scans, do my stock charts and my FinViz, kind of write my list. And I look through Twitter at some of the key people that I follow, and kind of catch up on, odds and ends, and probably do that for about an hour and a half, 2 hours, I would say, almost every night. And then, in the morning before I head off, on the days that I'm not in front of the screens, like I said, I basically set price alerts and kind of get set up on what I'm watching for the day. I would say one of the things that's kind of funny is early on it was like you had that FOMO, like, oh, I need to be in that. You get the alert, and I'm in my car, and I'll enter a position, right? And you know how that goes, as as probably most traders would probably know how that go. It doesn't usually go very well, right? So you learn over time, right? That like it's fine, you're gonna get a pullback, you're gonna have another opportunity, and just trading from your phone is just usually a lose. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you ever sort of think about what your trading would look like if you did trade full time? How do you sort of think about that?
I think most people who swing and day trade, I would say the majority probably make more money swing trading, right? Because you're in the position longer, you're given a little bit more room. It'd be interesting. I don't know. Honestly, I don't know if I would want the stress of doing it full time, right? Last year, on Thursday at Traders for a Cause, Kim and I were kind of chatting, Kim Curtin and I, and I think it was the first time kind of I met her, face to face, and I mentioned, that I work full time, and she was like so excited that I worked full time and traded. She was like, "That's the best thing ever." Why would you want to do anything otherwise? You like the stress and the emotion is just is just not there when you have income and you don't have to worry about feeding the family and whatever. So and then it kind of just makes trading my hobby, and it makes it just more fun and exciting, and it becomes a passion, right? Because you're not having to stress about that emotion.
Absolutely. And Kim's amazing. I know she talked in her presentation at Traders for a Cause about having your basic needs met. And, having a family, you have basic needs that need to be met for you and on behalf of your family. You're constantly thinking about that. And so having that income, you don't have to stress. And, we were talking about this, but you don't have to stress about being able to provide in that way, and you're able to enjoy trading for what it is and not be so
Exactly.
stressed losing sleep because you're focused on this position, waking up at 3 in the morning because there's 4 a.m. trades that can happen, and things like that. You get to just
Right.
enjoy trading for what it is and have your needs be met. So I think that's a great perspective to have. And I was talking to Dawson, who finds that even when he is able to trade full time, he ends up not doing as well because he's more likely to take more trades, or he does
Sure.
better when he's out by 11 a.m. or
Right.
has other work that he can go and do. So I think it's important just to keep that perspective that full time trading doesn't always necessarily mean more profits. In fact, it could be the
Right.
opposite in many ways.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you can make good money at part-time trading. I mean, you just, got to be smart and just kind of obviously keep your losses small. But I mean, if you have a swing and you're building a position over a couple months, I mean, you can make some good money on that, and then it adds up. So,
One other topic I wanted to talk about, Matt, was about networking with traders. Traders for a Cause we mentioned, and you meeting Kim, and I'm sure there's other traders that you met. Can you talk a little bit about what that experience has been like to open up and meet more traders and have them possibly give you ideas, keep your mind open about trades? What has all of that been like for you?
yeah, I mean, it's definitely been crazy. It's because in my job, I'll go to conferences, right, and kind of, the main focus is, you just get a pen and a paper and you're just writing notes. The lecturers are talking and you're just learning stuff, right? So my first Traders for a Cause, like you and I talked about a while ago, my first Traders for a Cause, I'm like, I have my notebook, and I sat next to this guy who, I said hello to, and I was writing notes, and him and I ended up hitting it off. Dan Gerard, who was actually in our room for years and years, and he lives local, down the Cape, and we became like best friends, and our wives hit it off and stuff. But he was about the only person I talked to that whole weekend. Really, it was like my job is to just take notes and learn, and then it's funny because we went to lunch, on that Saturday, I think, and we sat with Bella. And I'm a brand new trader, right? When everything goes up, I don't even know what a setup is. And I'm sitting there, and Bella and all his SMB guys are grilling Dan on what his setups are, and what he trades. And I'm thinking in my head, like, what are they even talking about? Like, I'm not prepared to. Hopefully they don't ask me. So I think each Traders for a Cause, and talking to these people, you walk out of there, after Traders for a Cause on Sunday, and you like you write a couple different notes of, I just learned, like, next time I come back, I'm going to be prepared for when Bella asks me what my setup is, and that sort of thing, right? And so, Brian Lee talks about, risk reward, and then, the whole time I'm like, what is he even talking about, right? And then so, like, I remember, like, I think Traders for a Cause 2023, I'm like writing notes with my wife on Sunday, and I'm like, finally, like, clicked. I was like, holy mackerel, I get what Brian was talking about, sort of thing, and, when meeting people like Brian Shannon, I mean, that few years ago we had Brian Shannon there, right? And, I'm in the bathroom. So, my first year I didn't talk to anyone. The second year I was like, it's more than just, I mean, it's the whole Traders for Cause thing is so many facets to it, right? I mean, obviously we're there for a good cause and we're donating money and that sort of thing, but there's so many other things, right? You meet traders, you get to ask questions, you learn from traders, you meet friends, and you meet some people who are going to be your best friends, right? I mean, I see like Ricky Analog and Russell, and those guys have been, trading together with, for years and years. They're like bros, and so you're going to have those types of people. So I think the biggest thing from it is, just you have to not be afraid to talk to these guys, and girls, and they were in the same position. And if, as long as, I think the biggest thing is, as long as you add value and you're not just, whatever, you add value, you have a good conversation, they're willing to, give as much energy back as you're willing to put in. And so I would just say, going forward, for anyone who's, first time there or second time there, just, you gotta just extend yourself, reach out, meet people, ask questions, and just really, like Lance always says, my biggest thing is, you leave there 1% better every year, right? And so you just kind of, and you make some notes on what you're going to do the following year, through what you've learned, the couple things you've learned, and you try to tweak those things, and you come back and you kind of do it all over again, and you just meet more people. And the other thing too, I think from my perspective, is the more people that I met, the IU people and that sort of thing, it just adds confidence to your whole trading environment, right? So you can go in the room and you can start typing alerts, and you're not afraid to do that because you met these people face to face and you spent a weekend together. And so it allows you to put yourself out there more too, because you're more confident, because now you know these people, right? You have a relationship with them, as opposed to just firing messages through Twitter or something. So it's huge. It's huge. It's definitely a huge event.
Yeah, absolutely. I have to echo everything there. Couldn't have said it better myself, and look forward to seeing you at Traders for a Cause this year, Matt.
Definitely.
And on
I'm
that
excited.
last
It's my
point,
favorite time of the year.
oh, absolutely. And on that last note, Matt, about Investors Underground, can you talk a little bit about, some of the benefits that Investors Underground has provided for you in terms of your trading, and how you use Investors Underground on a daily basis?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, kind of, Max has done some amazing things, in that room from a tech standpoint, for sure. I use his trend scanner, all the times. I have trade ideas, and I'm still at this point where, do I continue with trade ideas, or do I just kind of use the IU stuff? Because there's just so much in there. I think, obviously the format's a little bit different, so it's just a matter of putting the time in to kind of get through Max's stuff. But the technology is unbelievable. What it's in literally 4 years, 3 or 4 years, the tech and the scanning and that sort of stuff is just amazing. So I do use the trend scanner because I think there's so much info there from an intraday standpoint that, it's amazing. And then just, kind of like we talked about, like, there's so many expert traders, and there's just so many different mindsets of, how to trade. And, I'm going long on NVIDIA, and Taco's going short on NVIDIA, and there's just so many things. And then Chris with the options stuff, and there's so many really good traders in the room that you can learn from, and they're all willing to obviously help. And I think the midweek study sessions is huge, just to kind of be there and you kind of meet more people every time you do it, and you get confident to put yourself out there. So there's a lot to it. I think there's a lot of value for sure to the chat room, and I know chat rooms kind of get a bad rap at times, but I think IU for us is just it's phenomenal.
Yeah, absolutely. The improvements that have been made in the technology there are really, really impressive. I remember when I first joined IU, they were already impressive, but over the past few years, there's just been an explosion of new tools, features, and people in the room that are really taking it to the next level, making it a world-class type of offering for those who are members of IU. So,
Yeah, definitely agree.
Matt, if it's okay with you, I'd love to finish our episode with a lightning round. Pretty quick questions, pretty quick answers. Is that okay?
Sure, sure. Yeah, absolutely.
The first question I have is, what would you consider to be your greatest strength as a trader?
I would say work ethic and discipline for sure. I think being a part-time trader, if you're not doing the work, after your day, and just you're not going to be successful. So that's something that you just need to grind it out and just put the work in.
What would you say is the best piece of trading advice you've ever been given or heard?
So I don't know who actually said it. It was definitely a Traders for a Cause event, but basically be able to describe your setups in an elevator down, in a quick elevator conversation. And it might have been Nate that said it, it might have been Lance, but if you can't describe your setups in 30 seconds, you're probably not doing it right. You probably need to figure out how to make it more simple.
For traders who are struggling and maybe even considering stopping trading, what advice would you give them?
I would say don't you can't quit. You gotta kind of refocus, maybe size down. You don't need to be trading 10,000 shares or 1,000 shares. I mean, I basically after one of my Traders for a Cause events, I went back and just literally went and said I'm going to trade 25 shares and just kind of refine my process and my setup and kind of get good at a couple things, right? Because you can always add, it's scalable, right? So you can always just kind of add size once you kind of have a process and a setup. So don't give up. You got to just kind of put the work in, size down so you're not stressed, kind of keep the emotion out of it, and just, keep plugging away.
Do you believe there are any misperceptions that exist about trading?
Yeah, like the one we all probably hate the most, right, is that you're gambling, right? I have all these people like, no, you're really gambling. I'm like, no, no, I'm really not gambling, right? I mean, there's supply demand, the price action. There's so much stuff on that chart, psychology and whatever that we all look at, right, as traders, that we're not flipping a coin, right, and then just and I think there are traders who do, right, who they're out YOLO in whatever, but I think if you're really dedicated at the art and trying to be an expert at it, then you're certainly not gambling. It's kind of irritating.
Are there any aspects of your trading that you're actively working to improve on this year?
Yeah, I think kind of like I mentioned, I think my swing trade kind of stop is something that I'm really trying to look at, kind of running through the numbers on, whether I do that on technicals or whether I do that on kind of percent ADR or just a percent of my account. So still trying to kind of figure that out, obviously still keeping my losses, small, but how do I kind of make them even smaller and make sense within the process?
If you could give yourself one piece of trading advice at the start of your trading journey, what do you think that advice would be?
I would say use small size. Go start small. I mean, this whole thing it's a marathon, right? I mean, you're not going to be driving a Lambo in 6 months, right? It's just, and base hits, right? I mean, you make $300 a day or $100 a day, and whatever, and you're consistent like that. You're still making good money, and like I said, it's scalable. So once you kind of get confident and you got a year under your belt that you're profitable, then just add a little bit more size. So I think going into it, adding huge size, and while you're trying to learn, it's silly. So just I would say just go small.
Last question. For those who are interested in learning more about you or the way you trade, how can they do so?
So I'm on Twitter. My Twitter handle is at NH Fortini. I typically try to put charts on there just to kind of throw out, what I'm looking at. So, but they could totally find me there. And that's pretty much where I am most of the time. And then I'm in the room under M Fortini as well too.
Great. Matt, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today. It's been a real pleasure getting to see you and chat with you, and I look forward to seeing you soon at Traders for a Cause.
Absolutely, sounds good. I'm excited. Thanks, Anthony, for having me.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of The Trader's Journey. We have additional episodes we believe you might also like, so don't forget to subscribe. You'll be notified of upcoming episodes the moment they're published. Thanks for tuning in.